I'm 17, and I work the late-night janitorial shift at a small fast food restaurant in Gary, Indiana. It's not exciting work, but it's quiet, predictable, and it pays. Most nights I clean the floors, wipe down counters, and take out the trash, and by the time I clock out, the place is empty and locked behind me. I like that kind of routine. There's comfort in knowing exactly what my night will look like, even if it's boring. Tonight started like every other night. Around 11:30, the last customers left. My coworkers were already gone, the doors locked behind them, and the lights dimmed to the half-on setting the manager uses to save electricity. The hum of the refrigerators and the faint buzz of the fluorescent bulbs were the only sounds. I was mopping near the counter when I realized how still it felt. Not quiet in the normal sense, but unnaturally quiet, like the air itself had thickened. I paused for a second and told myself I was imagining it. I'm aware I tend to overthink things, especially when I'm alone. The first thing that unsettled me happened when I walked toward the back storage area with a bag of trash. There was a faint scrape, soft, almost imperceptible, but it came from a place where there shouldn't have been any movement. I froze, gripping the mop handle a little tighter, and waited. Nothing happened. The shadows cast by the dim lights didn't seem to shift, and yet it felt like someone had just stepped around the corner. I shook my head, telling myself it was the air vent rattling, or the bag scraping against the bin. Probably nothing. As I returned to the dining area, wiping tables, I noticed the condiments tray I'd left on the counter a few minutes ago had been slightly shifted. I remember the precise way it had been aligned because I always set it back perfectly after wiping. It wasn't far, just a few inches, but it was enough to make me pause. I checked the floor for a dropped item, looked under the tables, even glanced behind the soda machine. Nothing. Again, I tried to reason it away. Maybe I nudged it without thinking, but the uneasy feeling had started to settle in. Then the shadows began to move differently. Not the way shadows do when someone walks by or when the lights flicker. They seemed longer, stretching toward me just slightly more than physics should allow. I felt my skin tighten and my stomach drop, but I told myself it was fatigue, a trick of low lighting, a normal late-night brain thing. Still, I kept noticing little things. A chair slightly out of place, the back hallway light blinking on for a fraction of a second even though the sensors hadn't triggered, the quiet scrape from the storage area again. It was when I reached for the mop bucket near the back door that I felt it, the unmistakable sense that I was not alone. Not a noise, not a shadow, just a presence. Something or someone was sharing the space with me. I spun around instinctively, mop raised, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a figure maybe, just beyond the edge of the dim light. I told myself I was imagining it, that adrenaline was making my mind play tricks, but my hands were shaking, my breath quickening, and the feeling of eyes on me was too precise to dismiss. I decided to finish my shift as fast as possible. I returned to the front, double-checked the doors, and locked myself behind the counter while I called the manager on his cell. He was half asleep, his voice distant and unconcerned, telling me it was probably nothing and that I should just wait until morning. That wasn't reassuring, not really. I stayed there, mop in hand, scanning the dining area, the shadows stretching across the linoleum, the faint hum of the refrigerators. Nothing moved, and yet I couldn't shake the sensation that something was still there, just out of sight. I left when a coworker finally arrived for the early morning prep shift, and even then I kept glancing over my shoulder, certain of movement that wasn't there. I'm not sure if anyone will believe this, or even if I believe it myself, but I'm posting this just in case. because whatever it was, or whatever it isn't, it hasn't gone away. I'm 45, and I work in a high-rise office building in downtown Chicago. My job is mostly desk work, reviewing spreadsheets, preparing reports, checking projections. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and it's familiar. I usually leave around 6, but sometimes deadlines keep me later. That night, I was alone on the 42nd floor. The hum of the central air and the soft whir of the computers filling the space, the rest of my coworkers long gone. I like the quiet. It's predictable, controlled, or at least I thought it was. I was reviewing a set of reports when I first noticed it, a flicker at the edge of my vision, a movement that vanished whenever I tried to focus on it directly. It wasn't large, nothing that would justify fear or even curiosity, and I spent the next few minutes convincing myself it was fatigue, that the late hour and harsh fluorescent lighting were playing tricks on me. I rubbed my eyes, shifted my chair, even stood and looked around. The office appeared empty, everything exactly as I had left it. By the time I returned to my desk, the fluorescent lights above had begun flickering in a slow, irregular rhythm. Again, I told myself it was nothing, a failing ballast, an old fixture, but combined with that subtle peripheral movement, I felt a slight tightening in my chest. The hum of the electronics, the computers, the phones, the little desk fan I had running, suddenly seemed distorted, almost layered, as though there were two competing pitches at once, one a fraction of a second behind the other. For a moment, I thought I could hear whispering, soft and indistinct, but when I paused and listened carefully, it was just the air conditioning. Rationally, I knew that. My rational mind kept repeating it to myself. Still, the shadows began to behave differently, not dramatically, not like something out of a movie, but subtly. The corners of the office seemed deeper, stretched in a way that wasn't consistent with the lighting or architecture. A chair's shadow, a file cabinet's, the cubicle wall, they elongated and shifted when I looked away, only to appear normal when I looked directly. I found myself turning in small circles, scanning the space, trying to catch whatever it was, but nothing ever appeared in focus. I told myself I was imagining it. I wanted to be wrong. I even tried a distraction. I called my wife. Her voice over the phone was grounding, ordinary. We exchanged a few minutes of conversation about dinner and errands. I laughed softly at a joke she made. For a moment, the tension lifted, and I almost convinced myself I had been overreacting. But the second I hung up, I felt it again. That quiet, almost imperceptible awareness that someone or something was watching from one of the dark corners beyond the reach of the fluorescent glow. Rationally, I knew the floor was empty. I'm the only one here. I've checked every office, every conference room. Yet my gut told me otherwise, and no amount of reasoning fully dissuaded it. I packed up my laptop quickly, careful not to knock anything over, keeping my eyes on the peripheral spaces where the shadows lingered longest. Every step toward the elevator felt weighted, like moving through a current I couldn't see but could sense. The doors opened, the elevator descended, and I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, not daring to look behind me. When I reached the lobby, the building was silent, normal, fluorescent lit, everything exactly as it should be. I told myself I was safe. I drove home in the usual rhythm of stoplights and traffic, nothing out of place. And yet, I still felt it. that quiet sense that something had occurred, that something unseen had been present while I was on that floor. No one would confirm it, no evidence, no disturbances. Just me, my spreadsheets, and an office that seemed ordinary in every measurable way, but that I knew, with certainty, had not been. I don't know what happened that night, and I may never know. I only know I'm telling this now, because if nothing else, writing it down is a record, just in case. I am 78 years old and work the night shift at a gas station on a 2-lane highway in rural Wyoming, the kind of road that bends and disappears into open fields and doesn't bother announcing where it's going. Midnight is usually the quietest hour. By then, the truckers have passed through, the last local ranch hand has gone home, and the pumps sit idle under their buzzing lights like patient animals waiting to be fed. That night, I was doing what I always do at 12 sharp, counting the cash drawer. I like the order of it, the neat stacks of bills, the coins lined up by size. It gives my hands something to do and my mind something to rest on. Every few minutes, I'd glance up at the security monitor to check the pumps, then back down to the money. Same routine I've had for years. Same smell of old coffee, oil, and disinfectant. I remember thinking how still everything felt. Not peaceful exactly, just heavy, like the air itself was tired. The bang came from the back storage room. It wasn't a crash like something falling over, it was sharper than that. A single loud thud, as if someone had struck the wall with the flat of their hand. I froze with a $20 bill halfway folded. My first thought wasn't fear, it was annoyance. Raccoons sometimes got in back there, and once a stray dog had knocked over a crate of windshield fluid. I told myself it was that. It had to be. Still, I stayed quiet and listened. Nothing followed. No scuffling, no second noise. Just the low hum of the refrigerators and the fluorescent lights above me. After a moment, my heart slowed, and I finished counting the drawer. I even shook my head at myself, feeling foolish. At my age, you don't have the luxury of panicking over every sound. I stood up and walked to the counter window, peering out at the pumps. Empty. The road beyond them stretched out into darkness, the yellow line fading as it curved away. No headlights, no movement. I checked the monitor again. All clear. When I turned back toward the register, I heard something else. It was faint, so faint that at first I thought it was just the building settling. A soft sound, like fabric brushing against plastic. It seemed to come from somewhere near the counter, not the back room this time. I stopped moving and held my breath, listening harder than I probably should have. The sound came again, closer, slower. I looked down at the space beneath the counter, half expecting to see a shadow or a pair of eyes. There was nothing. Just the same scuffed linoleum floor and a discarded receipt near my shoe. I told myself it could be a mouse. We'd had them before. Tiny things can make noises that sound much bigger when you're alone. That was when I noticed how cold it had gotten. The station is always cool at night, but this was different. The air felt thick, as if it had weight. It pressed against my chest when I breathed in. My arms prickled, and I rubbed them without thinking. The thermostat hadn't changed. I checked it twice, squinting at the numbers as if they might rearrange themselves if I looked long enough. They didn't. I stayed behind the counter after that. I didn't sit. Sitting would have meant relaxing, and I didn't feel like that was something I should be doing. I kept my eyes moving, from the door to the aisles to the monitor, back again. I told myself stories to explain what I was feeling. Cold air sinks. Old buildings have drafts. Animals wander where they shouldn't. Every explanation sounded reasonable when I said it silently to myself. The trouble was, my body didn't seem to believe any of them. My heart was beating faster than it should have been, and my hands had gone stiff, the way they do in winter before you've had time to warm them. I became very aware of how loud my breathing sounded in the quiet station. Each inhale felt like it echoed. Another sound came from behind the counter. Not a bang this time, more like a careful shift of weight, as if something had moved and then decided to stop. I didn't turn around right away. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid that if I looked, I'd see something I couldn't explain away. When I did turn, there was nothing there, just the shelves of cigarettes and lottery tickets, exactly as they'd been an hour before. I thought about calling someone, not the police. I didn't have anything concrete to tell them, but maybe my niece, just to hear another voice. The idea passed quickly. What would I say? That the air felt wrong? That I heard noises I couldn't place? I've lived long enough to know how that sounds. So I did what I've always done. I worked. I wiped down the counter, slowly and carefully, keeping my eyes up. I restocked a small display near the register. I checked the pumps again, even though I knew they'd still be empty. Each task gave me a reason to stay where I was, to avoid the back room, to avoid standing still long enough for my thoughts to run ahead of me. The cold never left. If anything, it deepened, settling into my bones. The station felt smaller, the ceiling lower. Sounds didn't travel the way they should have. Even the hum of the lights seemed muffled, as though something was pressing in from all sides. Nothing else happened. No sudden movement, no figure stepping into view. Midnight slid into 1 o'clock without incident. When my relief arrived in the morning, I didn't mention any of it. I just handed over the keys, smiled like I always do, and drove home along the same winding road, the fields pale with early light. Everything looked ordinary again. But even now, sitting at my kitchen table hours later, I can still feel that heavy air in my chest. I keep thinking about how quiet the station was afterward, and how that quiet didn't feel empty at all. I'll be back there tonight. I always am. And I can't shake the feeling that whatever made those sounds didn't leave. It just learned to stay still when I was watching.